As much as we love the Marvel Cinematic Universe, we do have some questions about some of the trotted-out tropes we see over and over again. Today, we're going to be taking a closer look at the illustrious Avengers and learning what it is that makes them so special by examining the strange rules that they all seem to follow. From nailing the perfect three-point landing to putting together the perfect incognito outfit, you might be surprised to learn what your favorite heroes have in common. Our Marvel heroes are good at a lot of things. Infinity War notwithstanding, they have a pretty good success rate with saving the day. And of course, our heroes need to have perfectly crafted crime-fighting outfits. But when they're off the clock and out in public, they also seem to have an unofficial uniform. It's easy to joke about people not recognizing Superman when he puts glasses on, but the Avengers have pretty simple stealth suits too. Simply by putting on a sweatshirt, a hat, and maybe a pair of sunglasses, they're able to pretty much become invisible. Come on, these are real-life superheroes that everybody knows about. Steve Rogers does PSAs for kids, and Tony Stark is constantly in the press. But yet they're totally able to blend in with their surroundings as long as their heads are covered? This clothing version of incognito mode is really just some intense plot armor, because we're pretty sure it wouldn't work in real life. Sorry, Loki, your illusions are pretty good, but you're clearly not on the same level as these guys when they throw on some sweats and pull their hoods up. Have you ever seen any of these people before in your life? Back in the day when you had to pick up an actual paper book to see your favorite superheroes, Marvel stood out from its competitors because they put their heroes in the real world. Okay, Captain America didn't really punch Hitler in the face, although that would have been awesome. But these heroes existed in real places, encountered actual people, and dealt with real-world events. It made them feel more relatable and resonated with their fans. Which is why all Avengers on the big screen need to remind you that they're hip to the real world, and they do this approximately every 5 minutes. Everybody knows Peter Parker is a seemingly endless fountain of pop culture references, but it's an important part of being an Avenger, apparently. Remember the part in Infinity War where Tony Stark talks about Squidward from SpongeBob? Hey, we've seen that show. It's relatable. It's relatable. Everybody, it's relatable. It's a wonder our heroes have any time to save the day, what with all the media they apparently consume, since they're ready to fire off a quip at a moment's notice. We kid, but in a way, these pop culture references really do remind us that our heroes exist in a modern time, and in a world not too unlike our own. But, you know, with a lot more aliens falling from the sky. We all know that it takes a whole lot more than a supersuit or superhuman powers to be a superhero. We know that because it's a lesson we've seen the Avengers learn over and over and over again. Thor formed a deep emotional bond with his hammer Mjolnir, and the two of them had a great time pummeling enemies together, but then Mjolnir gets crushed to smithereens. It's a devastating blow for Thor, until he learns that the true power was inside him all along. We've seen Tony Stark go through the whole "am I a superhero even when I'm not in my super suit" thing. And he also told Steve Rogers that he would be nothing without the super soldier serum. We're pretty sure that's a statement he regrets making by now. In fact, the reason Steve Rogers became a superhero was because he's so special on the inside despite being laughably puny and weak on the outside. We're not saying that we all like to think of ourselves as secretly special on the inside, but that's why these heroes resonate with us. But, actually, never mind. That's exactly what we're saying. The Avengers know we all like to think if we only had a magic hammer or some web shooters, we could be superheroes too. If you're feeling low about not being a superhero, just keep in mind that one of the prerequisites is having a horrible family. Peter Parker has the most normal, supportive family in the MCU, and both of his parents are dead. That should tell you how low the bar is for loving MCU families. Tony Stark's father was a brilliant man who never told his son he loved him. He did help him out with the arc reactor technology, but that's not quite the same. Bruce Banner's dad was an abusive monster, and Bruce's rage at him is what helped create the Incredible Hulk in the first place. Well, that and a big old dose of gamma rays. And Thor's family, yikes. Odin is right up there with Thanos in the Hall of Bad Daddies, and he certainly did a number on Loki's psyche. But we suppose that doesn't seem so bad now that we know he banished his other kid to an eternity of torment. There was a time where Clint Barton had a seemingly happy family, although his wife wasn't very supportive of his superhero career. But based on the trailer for Avengers Endgame, it seems like the Barton family might be a thing of the past. Captain Marvel was a great movie for a lot of reasons, and it was exciting to see a female superhero finally get her own standalone MCU film. But as momentous as this occasion was, we also got to experience something else we never thought we would see in a Marvel movie: Nick Fury not knowing everything. Seriously, is Nick Fury omnipotent? Does he have omnisense like Heimdall did? Being a member of the Avengers means knowing that Nick Fury could show up at any moment to essentially insult you and then just send you on a dangerous mission. Seriously, he's as sneaky as John Turturro's character from Mr. Deeds. Marvel, please accept this humble pop culture reference as our Avengers application. During the movie Iron Man, Tony Stark blew all of our minds when he announced to the world that he was Iron Man. We thought nothing could top that moment until Nick Fury showed up to tell Tony Stark that he's not impressed and that he's only one small part of an entire universe of heroes. Being an Avenger means interacting with Nick Fury, whether you want to or not. And in his defense, he's seen some crazy stuff over the years. Hey, he's even old enough to remember when blockbusters existed. I'm so old. There are a lot of things that Marvel Studios does really well, but there are also some things it's struggled with over the years. One of them is definitely realizing that movies don't have to have romantic subplots to be interesting, and that it's totally fine to be a single Avenger. But it seems like our heroes who have been around for quite some time have had to go through the obligatory, awkward, unconvincing romance. Heck, Black Widow's had to go through a few. She hasn't even gotten her own movie yet. The comic book version of Jane Foster was once deemed worthy of not only wielding Mjolnir, but taking on the mantle of Thor himself. But in the MCU, her character fell flat, and so did her romance with the God of Thunder. Although he's been described as volatile, self-obsessed, and doesn't play well with others, Tony Stark is an outlier, in that he has a convincing romantic relationship. Well, except for the time he said they were on a break during Civil War. Hawkeye surprised us all by having a secret family we didn't know about, and Steve Rogers shared a smooch with his ex-girlfriend's great niece. Ugh. Being an Avenger means having to make big decisions and deal with the consequences that result. Most of our heroes are good at the first part, but the second part of that, not so much. We know hindsight is 20/20, but it almost seems like our heroes are totally incapable of exhibiting the tiniest amount of foresight. Tony Stark may be a brilliant inventor, but his plans always seem to go terribly wrong. And we're not just talking about Ultron here, although he and Bruce Banner should have probably seen that coming. He was the one who convinced the government to handle the Battle of New York cleanup with no consideration for those who were already handling it. He created the Vulture, who nearly killed Peter Parker. Oh, and speaking of that, Tony also brought along a young Peter to a huge superhero battle during Civil War. Are we sure Tony just doesn't really hate the kid? Maybe he wants to be the only one making pop culture references. And Tony isn't alone in this. Did Steve Rogers think he could rescue Bucky and nobody would ever find out the truth about Tony's parents? And as for Thor, the best idea he ever had was letting a fire demon lay waste to his own home. Okay, so while we might like to poke fun at the Avengers for their lackluster love lives, their poor choices, and their ability to go undercover, they do have some good qualities too. Each member of this team has proven over and over again that they're not afraid to sacrifice their own lives to save others. Steve Rogers dunked his own plane into the ocean during Captain America: The First Avenger because he wasn't willing to risk lives to land safely. When he first met Tony Stark, he loudly doubted his ability to sacrifice himself for others. Boy oh boy, we bet he felt stupid later on in the Avengers when Tony grabbed a hold of a missile and flew through a wormhole with it. We've seen Clint Barton take a major risk by getting involved to back up his pals during Captain America: Civil War. He wasn't even supposed to be there that day. And Thor nearly lost his life trying to forge a weapon capable of defeating Thanos. Don't forget, during Thor Ragnarok, Bruce Banner was willing to turn into the Hulk in order to save Asgard, despite having spent years stuck in a transformation and believing he was signing up to do so again. We all know that the Avengers have one another, but it also seems like they all have to have an evil counterpart. This is a villain who basically exists to be the antithesis of a specific hero. When Captain America was created to fight Nazis, and Marvel Comics erroneously believed that we would get tired of seeing him just pummel Hitler over and over again. So, we got the fictional Nazi the Red Skull, who admittedly also has a very punchable face. As for the Incredible Hulk, his villainous counterpart was the Abomination, who appeared in that movie most of us forget exists. Don't worry, CBR's here to remind ya. We also have Thor, who was born into power he didn't deserve at first, and Loki, who was desperate to take power he had no legitimate claim to. As far as villains go, it's hard to say who is the complete antithesis of Tony Stark, because in many ways he's his own worst enemy. Who's done more harm to Tony Stark than the man himself? Of course, the villain we all can't stop talking about right now is Thanos, and that's because he's the opposite of all of our favorite Avengers. He wants to sacrifice those he loves for his own personal gain. This kind of ties into our heroes having absolutely no ability to accurately predict the consequences of their actions. Instead of thinking things through and maybe writing up a pros and cons list, they tend to just react to things as they happen. They're the epitome of being reactive rather than proactive, and it leaves them scrambling when the stakes are at their highest. And when they do try to be proactive, things tend to go terribly wrong. Case in point, Avengers Age of Ultron. Tony decides to head off an alien invasion by creating an ultra-powerful artificial intelligence. Yeah, who could have predicted that wouldn't end well? If you think about it, one of the reasons Avengers Endgame is so exciting is that our heroes might finally get a chance to be proactive about something. Sure, they're ultimately reacting to the decimation, but they do have a head start when it comes to putting things right while Thanos is down on the farm. Let's just hope they manage to get it together this time and not make matters worse. Sorry, we didn't mean to be so pessimistic, it's just sometimes hard to see the universe is half full instead of half empty. This is one superhero trope that we have to admit we have some affection for. To paraphrase our close personal friend Deadpool, ooh, superhero landing. You know that's really hard on your knees. Totally impractical. And he's not wrong when it comes to this three-point landing maneuver. Whether our heroes are getting knocked back, leaping off tall surfaces, or falling out of the sky, they always have to do that three-point landing for some reason. One hand either rests on the ground or dramatically punches into it while the other remains in the air. Tucking and rolling is not an option for an Avenger, and instead they gotta land in that crouching position that nobody in their right mind would ever think to land in. And of course, this three-point landing is often accompanied by a dramatic glance to the camera or a nearby enemy. We know we have to suspend our disbelief when we get ready to watch a Marvel movie, but this over-the-top landing pose is a bit much. And now that we've pointed it out to you, you won't be able to stop noticing every single time one of our heroes do it. Sorry, not sorry. In the Marvel Cinematic Universe, there is always a new villain to fight and a hero to take them down before we really learn anything about them. For some reason, our heroes never seem to concern themselves with what caused villains to wind up that way. We're just told that Thanos is a bad guy, and that's pretty much it. But in the comic books, the Mad Titan actually has an interesting and pretty sad backstory, which makes you feel somewhat sad for him. The guy was so ugly at birth that his own mother tried to kill him. Sure, it doesn't justify his actions, but it paints a picture of a more well-rounded character. But the Avengers don't care about that. They see a villain pop up and they strike him down, and that's it. Honestly, a big reason Loki was the only really compelling villain for a while is that he was the only one we ever really learned anything about. Meanwhile, the Avengers rogue gallery is filled with one-shot, one-dimensional villains who never really get developed. Hela wants to blow stuff up just because. Aldrich Killian never got over Tony being rude to him. And Whiplash, yeah, we think you get our point. If you're the kind of person who likes things neat and orderly, you're not going to make it as an Avenger. These folks seem to feel the compulsive need to absolutely lay waste to every place they visit. Seriously, it's even been a major plot point in multiple movies, and everybody knows about it. Director Scott Derrickson says it was on his mind while working on the movie Doctor Strange. He admitted he finds it cliched that so often the Avengers walk away from ruined cities, so he decided to undestroy a city in his movie. Well, in the Avengers' defense, that's probably a lot easier when you have magic at your disposal. Even Kevin Feige admitted that sometimes Marvel Studios goes overboard with some of the high-stakes grand-scale battles. He points to the infamous airport scene which took place during Captain America: Civil War. The stakes weren't as high as they usually are. An entire city wasn't at risk, and yet people consider it one of the best scenes in MCU history. But of course, the major conflict in that movie ultimately started because of the Avengers causing an extreme amount of damage. Earlier, we talked about the plot armor worn by the Avengers when they need to walk around in public inconspicuously. But the classic hoodie hat combo isn't the only convenient plot device in the MCU. Being an Avenger means interacting with one of the MacGuffins used to propel the plot forward. If you're frantically checking the MCU wiki to find out what a MacGuffin is, don't worry, we'll fill you in. It's an object which simply exists to drive the plot forward. Think about the mysterious glowing suitcase in Pulp Fiction. In that movie, it drives everything forward, despite the fact that we don't even know what's in it. For all we know, that movie takes place in the MCU, and one of the Infinity Stones was inside of it. Maybe Samuel L. Jackson decided working for S.H.I.E.L.D. would be an improvement over working for Marcellus Wallace. Anyway, speaking of Infinity Stones, they're the MacGuffins of the MCU. Our heroes have to deal with them because that's what has to happen in order to move the plot along, and the reason we can have epic movies like those in the Avengers series. Vision wouldn't be able to exist without one of these handy-dandy little plot devices, which is something he learned the hard way twice. Of course, everybody knows being an Avenger means fighting against bad guys, but at some point, you're also going to probably take a swing at a fellow Avenger. Of course, there's the famous Captain America Civil War scene we talked about earlier when our heroes settle some ideological differences by getting in a physical battle with one another. And then there's the part of the movie where friends Tony Stark and Steve Rogers broke all of our hearts by trading blows with one another. Not cool, guys. During Thor Ragnarok, we saw the Hulk and Thor duke it out in the Grandmaster's arena. We've seen Falcon fight with Ant-Man, and Tony even has a suit of armor designed for fighting against the Hulk. And it seems like just yesterday we were going to the theaters to see the Avengers, where we saw our heroes fighting against each other to determine who got to retain custody of Loki. Thankfully, it seems as though our heroes have gotten a lot of this fighting out of their system. Nowadays, they mostly just stick to verbally attacking each other and making scathing remarks during dangerous situations. Maybe someday they'll learn how to talk about their feelings, but in the meantime, we appreciate the banter. What do you think about these 15 tropes all of the Avengers seem to be bound by? Do you appreciate them, or do you think it's time some of them were phased out? Let us know what you think in the comment section below, and then click on that subscribe button for more videos from us here at CBR. Bye for now.